Amara had always known her parents saw her as a burden, but she never imagined the day would come when they would trade her like a broken object, a flawed possession they no longer wanted to carry. Born in a harsh, forgotten corner on the edge of the frontier, she had grown up carrying water on her back, cooking meals she never ate first, and obeying orders that were never softened with kindness. But when she turned 22, the whispers began. The neighbors talked, her mother listened, her father glared. A woman who cannot give children is not a woman, they muttered. Amara remembered the night her mother returned from a healer, her voice sharp as a blade. "The old midwife says you are barren, useless." She hadn't even been examined. No one cared. That one word, barren, became her identity, her label, the reason her father's temper grew hotter and her mother's patience thinner. Weeks later, they summoned her into the one-room house, not even bothering to look her in the eye as they told her she was being given away. Sold, traded, exchanged for a bag of grain, a mule, and 2 rifles. "We don't need you anymore," her father said, scratching his beard like she was a chore he had finally completed. Her mother simply shrugged. "A family in the hills needs a girl. They said they'll take you." The family in the hills turned out to be a group of men known for running a labor camp. Cold, distant, ruthless men who kept women working from sunrise to nightfall. Amara didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago. Instead, she let the numbness settle over her like a thick fog as one of the men threw her onto the back of a wagon and hauled her away from the only home she had ever known. She felt neither sadness nor fear, only emptiness. She was no longer a daughter, no longer a woman in her parents' eyes, just a body to be used. Days in the camp were harsh. The men barked commands, the women obeyed without question. The cold bit into her bones at night, and the heat cracked her hands in the day. Sometimes she wondered if life was meant to be this cruel for everyone, or only for girls like her who carried labels that others used to define their future. The other women whispered to her sometimes. "Don't think too much," one told her. "Thinking will break your spirit." But Amara's spirit felt broken already, shattered by the family who hadn't hesitated to discard her. Weeks passed before she heard the sound of horses approaching, the kind of deep, thundering gallop that made the ground quiver. The men in the camp straightened up. Visitors weren't common. Amara kept her head low, cleaning tools as she'd been ordered, but then she heard a voice, steady, calm, and surprisingly gentle. "I'm looking for workers," the man said. The camp owner grunted. "You can look, but nothing here is free." Amara didn't dare glance up, not until the stranger's voice drew closer. "What about her?" he asked. She froze. Slowly she lifted her eyes. The man standing before her was a cowboy, tall, rugged, with tired eyes and a beard dusted with gray at the edges. He looked like someone who carried more burdens than he ever admitted, someone who had weathered too many storms alone. "Her?" the camp owner scoffed. "She ain't worth much. Parents sold her off cheap. People say she's barren." The cowboy's gaze flickered, less judgment than curiosity. "What's your name?" he asked her. She hesitated. Amara. Do you want to leave this place?" The question hit her like a sudden gust of wind, unexpected, impossible, unreal. Want? She hadn't been allowed to want anything for years. She blinked, unsure whether he was mocking her. "She does what she's told," the camp owner said, stepping between them. "You want her, you pay." The cowboy's eyes softened, not pity, but something like understanding. Then he nodded once and paid. Just like that. Not as if he were buying property, but as if he were rescuing someone he didn't want to see swallowed by darkness. She was led out of the camp with nothing but the clothes on her back and her tangled hair blowing in the wind. The cowboy didn't speak until they were far from the shouting men and their cold stares. "My name's Elias," he said gently. "I've got a ranch a few miles out. 5 kids. I could use help. Cooking, cleaning, schooling them. Nothing more." Amara's heart jolted. 5 children? He noticed her panic. "Their mother passed 2 winters ago," he explained softly. "It's been rough since. They need someone kind around, someone who won't leave like the world tends to do." He said the last part quietly, almost to himself. Amara didn't know how to trust kindness, but something about his voice made her believe he wasn't lying. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could hire anyone." "Because you look like someone who deserves a second chance," he said simply. "And because my kids, they could use someone who understands what it's like to hurt, but still chooses gentleness." The ranch was simple but warm. His children, aged from a toddling 2-year-old to a quiet 12-year-old, peered at her with curious, cautious eyes. Elias introduced her gently. "This is Amara. She's going to help us around here." Amara expected suspicion, fear, resistance. Instead, the children were drawn to her in a way that startled her. Maybe because they sensed her softness. Maybe because they saw something in her she'd forgotten she had. That night, Elias found her standing on the porch staring at the distant hills, wondering when this fragile peace would shatter. "You're safe here," he murmured, leaning against the railing. "You don't owe me anything. You don't have to earn your place. You're not property here." No one had ever spoken to her that way. No one had ever seen her as anything but a burden or a tool. The next few days were quiet, almost dreamlike. She cooked meals, helped mend clothes, read stories to the younger children, and gently braided the girls' hair each morning. The two boys, still grieving their mother, slowly warmed to her. She often caught Elias watching, not with desire, but with a kind of gratefulness she didn't fully understand. One evening, she overheard one of the neighbors whispering to Elias, "A Barren girl? You sure that's wise? She can't give you anything." Elias's voice was firm. "She's already giving my kids something they haven't had since their mama passed: warmth." That night, Amara cried for the first time in years, not from pain, but from the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being seen as valuable. But shadows still lingered in her mind. Her parents' voices echoed, "Useless, barren, worth nothing." The words clung to her like chains. One evening, as she tucked the children into bed, Elias approached her slowly, sensing the storm inside her. "You walked into this house like a wounded fawn," he said quietly, "but every day you're showing me what strength looks like." "Strength?" she whispered in disbelief. "I was thrown away." "Then let me tell you something," he said, stepping closer but keeping his voice gentle. "The world threw you away because it didn't deserve you. But my children, they're already starting to love you, and that means something." She swallowed hard. "Why are you so kind?" His answer came softly. "Because life has taken enough from both of us. I don't want to be another thing that hurts you." She didn't know it yet, but that was the moment she began to heal. Amara had been living at the ranch for nearly 2 months when she realized she had begun to smile without thinking, laugh without fear, and breathe without shame. It was as though the land itself had wrapped its arms around her. Warm sunlight across the fields, the gentle clucking of the hens, the rich smell of fresh bread she baked each morning, and the sound of children running through the yard as though joy were their second language. Elias watched it all quietly, like a man witnessing spring after a long, brutal winter. He never rushed her, never crossed boundaries, never made her feel she owed him anything, and perhaps that was what made her heart stir in ways she didn't understand. But healing wasn't a straight path. There were nights Amara woke up shaking, dreams filled with echoes of her parents' cold eyes and the camp's harsh voices. Elias always noticed the shadows beneath her eyes the next morning. One dawn, he found her sitting alone by the barn, hugging her knees, trying not to tremble. "You don't have to hide the hurt," he said softly, sitting beside her. "Pain doesn't make you weak." She swallowed. "Elias, why me? Why did you choose to bring me here?" "Because when I saw you in that place," he answered, looking out at the sunrise, "you looked like someone who had never been given a reason to stay alive for herself. And I wanted to give you a home where you didn't have to fight for the right to exist." His words hit her like a warm wind, gentle yet powerful. She whispered, "What if I disappoint you?" Elias shook his head. "You're not here to please me. You're here to live." Days turned into weeks, and the children clung to her as though she were part of their hearts. Little Sarah begged her to braid her hair every morning. Jacob asked her to taste every meal he attempted to cook. The twins wouldn't go to bed unless she told them a story. And Elias, he watched quietly, his gratitude deepening every day, but not everyone approved. One afternoon, when Amara was at the market purchasing flour, the whispers followed her like shadows. "That's the Barren girl the cowboy took in. Poor man. Should have found someone better. A woman who can't bear children is no real wife." Their cruel voices, coded in judgment, pierced through old scars she thought were starting to heal. She returned to the ranch shaken, her hands trembling. Elias found her in the kitchen, unmoving, staring at the dough she wasn't kneading. "Talk to me," he said. She swallowed. "The town, they said you made a mistake bringing me here, that I'm—" "Nothing." Elias's face softened, his voice steady and unshaken. "Do you know what I told my eldest son last night?" She looked up. "What?" "I told him that you saved this family, not by giving us children, but by giving us life again." Her breath caught. Elias stepped closer, not touching her, but speaking gently. "My wife died 2 years ago. Since then, my kids cried themselves to sleep. I worked until my bones hurt, but I couldn't fill the emptiness in this home. You didn't replace her. You healed what grief had broken." She shook her head. "But I can't give you more children." "Amara." He cut her off softly. "I didn't bring you here to give me children. I brought you here to give yourself a life. If someday you choose to stay with us, not because you must, but because you want to, I'll be grateful for that alone." Tears blurred her vision. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever valued her heart over her usefulness. That evening, after the children were asleep, Elias found her on the porch again. The moon cast silver light across the land. "Elias," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I can be what your family deserves." He stepped beside her, hands in his pockets, his voice low. "Do you think my children deserve someone who loves them? Because that's all they want, and that's all you give them every day." She turned to him. "But what about you?" He took a slow breath. "Me?" His eyes softened. "I've already grown to care about you, Amara, not because of what you can give, but because of who you are when you don't think anyone is watching." Her heart pounded. "And who am I?" "A woman who survived cruelty but still chooses kindness," he said softly. "A woman who listens when a child cries, who sings softly when she thinks no one hears, who holds pain like a scar but still smiles at the sunrise." She stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "And you're not ashamed that I'm barren?" "Ashamed?" he repeated, stunned. Then he shook his head. "Amara, you've mothered my children without birthing them. You've given them warmth without having to carry them in your womb. Family isn't only blood. Sometimes it's love that chooses you." Her resolve finally cracked, tears streaming down her face as Elias stepped closer. He didn't touch her until she nodded. Silent permission. Then he brushed a tear from her cheek with the gentleness of a man who understood wounds. "If you choose to stay," he murmured, "I'll spend every day proving that you were never barren. Your heart was just waiting for the right place to bloom." She leaned into his touch, feeling the truth of his words sink into her soul. She wasn't barren. She wasn't worthless. She wasn't a burden. She was loved, not for what she could produce, but for what she already was. In the days that followed, Amara grew lighter, more confident, more alive. The town people began to notice how Elias smiled more, how the children laughed louder, how peace had settled over the ranch like sunshine. And slowly, whispers turned into admiration. One evening, as the family gathered around the table, Elias caught her eyes. "Amara," he said gently, "you can stay as long as you want, with us, with me." She looked around, the glowing faces of the children, the warm fire dancing across the walls, the man who had given her a home, and, for the first time in her life, she chose something for herself. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Elias nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Then welcome home." And just like that, the girl who had been thrown away found a place where her heart was finally allowed to live and love and grow, proof that sometimes the family you deserve is the one that chooses you, even when the world calls you broken. But Amara knew the truth now. She was not broken, she was blooming,